The Prosecco was cheap, the laughter was forced, and my future wife was about to destroy my life in front of 30 witnesses. I should have seen it coming when Nessa ordered the most expensive appetizers without looking at me first. That was her tell, the way she'd spend money when she was planning something cruel. "Everyone, I have an announcement," Nessa said, standing up at our rehearsal dinner. The lakeside bar fell quiet, except for the gentle lapping of waves against the dock outside. Her friends Marcy and Fiona leaned forward with eager curiosity. "I'm canceling the wedding. I don't love Jared anymore." The silence stretched like a rubber band about to snap. I felt 30 pairs of eyes on me, waiting for me to crumble, to beg, to make a scene. Instead, I stood up slowly, unclasped the engagement ring from my pocket where I'd been fidgeting with it, and set it on the table with a soft clink. "Well," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "looks like I'm throwing a dodged-a-disaster party instead." A few nervous chuckles rippled through the crowd. Nessa's face went pale, then red. She hadn't expected this reaction. "Actually," I continued, reaching into my jacket, "since we're making announcements, I have a few of my own." I pulled out 2 folded papers and handed them to Marcy and Fiona. "These are invoices for the gifts you've been buying on my credit card. Payment due in 30 days. Marcy's mouth fell open. "Jared, you thought wrong. And Nessa," I turned to my almost wife, "remember that prenup you kept putting off signing? Turns out I don't need it anymore. I closed all our joint accounts this morning and pulled the deposits for the venue, the flowers, everything. Amazing what you can accomplish when you wake up early." The crowd was murmuring now, a low buzz of shock and gossip. Nessa tried to speak, but I wasn't finished. "The house is in my name, the cars are in my name, and your credit cards? Well, let's just say you might want to call your parents." My phone buzzed with a text from Pete, my best friend, and the only person in this room I trusted. "Guess who's sitting in the parking lot in a black BMW? Your replacement." I looked at Nessa, really looked at her, and saw something I'd missed before. Guilt, relief, and underneath it all, fear. She'd planned this humiliation, but she hadn't planned for me to fight back. "Enjoy your freedom, Nessa. Both of you." I walked out of that bar with my head high, leaving behind the sound of exploding gossip and Nessa's shrill voice trying to explain herself to a room full of people who were already pulling out their phones. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Pete was waiting by my truck, smoking a cigarette and grinning like he'd just won the lottery. "That was beautiful, man. Absolutely beautiful. You see the look on her face when you mentioned the money?" "Just the beginning," I said, climbing into the driver's seat. "Tell me about the BMW. Brent Avery, that slick real estate guy with the perfect teeth. He's been sitting out there for 20 minutes, probably waiting for his cue to come comfort poor heartbroken Nessa." Brent Avery. I should have known. He'd been sniffing around Nessa for months, always finding excuses to stop by the bookstore where she worked, always ready with compliments about her taste in literature. I'd thought he was harmless, just another small-town wannabe trying to impress a pretty woman. "How long do you think this has been going on?" Pete asked. "Long enough for her to plan this whole show. You don't cancel a wedding in public unless you've got somewhere else to land." The next morning, I drove to Loretta's house. My neighbor was 73, lived alone, and knew everything that happened on our street. She was watering her garden when I pulled up. "Jared, honey, I heard about last night. I'm so sorry." "Don't be sorry, Loretta. Be helpful. How long has Brent been coming around when I'm not home?" Her face scrunched up like she'd tasted something sour. "Oh, that boy. About 3 months now. Always parks down the street like he's being sneaky. But I see everything from my kitchen window. Tuesdays and Thursdays mostly. Sometimes Saturdays when you're at the hardware store." 3 months. While I was working overtime to pay for the wedding, Nessa was entertaining her backup plan in our living room. Thanks, Loretta. You're a gem. You're better off without her, honey. That girl always thought she was too good for this town. Back home, I sat in my workshop, the converted garage where I restored old furniture, and planned my next move. Nessa had left her iPad on the kitchen counter, probably forgotten in her rush to pack her things. I knew her passcode because she'd never bothered to change it from our anniversary date. The messages were all there, months of texts between Nessa and Brent, starting innocent and getting progressively more intimate. Photos I didn't want to see, plans for their future that didn't include me. And something interesting. Fiona had been blackmailing Nessa about the affair, demanding expensive gifts and cash in exchange for keeping quiet. I forwarded everything to my own email, then deleted the evidence from her device. Let her wonder how much I knew. My phone rang. Brent's name flashed on the screen. Hello, Jared. This is Brent Avery. I think we should talk. I think you're right. Meet me at Murphy's garage on Route 9 in an hour. Come alone. Murphy's was where Pete worked, and Pete owed me more favors than either of us could count. When Brent pulled up in his pristine BMW, I was ready for him. Flat tire? I asked innocently as Brent got out of his car, looking confused. No, He stopped when he saw the nail sticking out of his front tire. What the? Lucky I'm here to help, I said, pulling out my jack. These coastal roads are rough on tires. Amazing how easy it is to pick up debris. As I helped him change the tire, I kept up a steady stream of conversation. You know, Brent, trust is a funny thing. Once it's punctured, it's never quite the same. Sure, you can patch it up, but there's always that weak spot waiting to blow out when you least expect it. Brent was sweating despite the cool morning air. Jared, I want you to know... Know what? That you've been screwing my fiancée for 3 months? That you helped her plan that little performance last night? Oh, I know plenty. I tightened the last lug nut with more force than necessary. Here's what you don't know, though. I'm not some heartbroken fool you can manipulate. I'm a man who fixes things for a living, and right now, I'm fixing a problem. Brent backed away from me. Are you threatening me? I'm educating you. See, in my line of work, I've learned that everything has a breaking point. Wood, metal, relationships, reputations. The trick is knowing exactly where to apply pressure. I stood up, wiping my hands on a rag. Drive carefully, Brent. These roads can be dangerous when you're not paying attention. The spring mixer at the community center was Nessa's kind of event. A chance to dress up, network, and remind everyone how sophisticated she was compared to the rest of us small-town folks. She wouldn't miss it, especially now that she needed to control the narrative about our breakup. I arrived early and positioned myself near the refreshment table, watching the door. Nessa walked in at exactly 8 o'clock, wearing a red dress I'd bought her for Christmas. Brent followed 5 minutes later, trying to look casual. The beauty of small-town gossip is that everyone's already talking about you before you walk into the room. I could see the whispered conversations, the sideways glances, the way people's phones kept buzzing with updates. Marcy and Fiona flanked Nessa like bodyguards, but their loyalty was about as reliable as a paper umbrella in a hurricane. I waited until the room was full, then pulled out my phone. The AirDrop function was a beautiful thing, especially when you had a modified wedding invitation featuring a very clear photo of Nessa and Brent in a passionate embrace taken through the window of his apartment 3 days ago. Within seconds, every phone in the room was pinging with notifications. The image spread like wildfire through the crowd. Gasps, murmurs, and the unmistakable sound of screenshots being taken filled the air. Nessa's face went white when she saw people looking at their phones, then at her, then back at their phones. Brent tried to push through the crowd toward the exit, but Pete was blocking his path, grinning like a shark. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced, raising my beer bottle, "I'd like to thank you all for coming to what I'm calling the Truth in Advertising celebration. As you can see from tonight's featured presentation, some products don't match their packaging." Marcy grabbed Nessa's arm. You told me you weren't seeing him until after the wedding was called off. You lied to all of us, Fiona added, already live streaming the confrontation on Instagram. My followers are going to eat this up. Brent finally reached me, his face red with anger. You son of a… Careful, Brent. We're in mixed company. I smiled at him. Don't worry about the tux rental, though. You'll need it for all the apology tours you'll be making. You can't do this to us. I'm not doing anything. I'm just sharing the truth. Isn't that what you wanted? To be together? Well, congratulations. Now everyone knows. Nessa was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks as her friends turned on her like a pack of wolves. The crowd was loving every second of it, phones recording from every angle. This is harassment, she screamed. No, I said calmly. This is consequences. There's a difference. As the evening dissolved into chaos, I slipped out the back door and drove to Brent's apartment complex. The spare key Nessa had hidden in her jewelry box opened his door easily. I didn't steal anything. I wasn't a thief. But I did relocate his belongings. Every piece of furniture, every appliance, every personal item went into his building's storage garage, carefully arranged and covered with a tarp. I left a note on his kitchen counter. Hope you find your stuff faster than you found your conscience. J. By morning, Brent's phone would be ringing with calls from his real estate firm. Rumors of unprofessional conduct traveled fast in a small business community, and his boss had a strict policy about employees who brought negative attention to the company. Brent showed up at my house the next evening, pounding on my door like a man possessed. I opened it slowly, coffee mug in hand, as if I'd been expecting him. You're insane, he shouted. My apartment, my job, my… Your what? Your reputation? Your girlfriend? Seems to me you lost those all by yourself. I want this to stop. Now. Or what? You'll call the police? Tell them what exactly? That someone exposed your affair? That your own choices have consequences? He pushed past me into my living room, and I let him. Sometimes you have to let the mouse think it's escaped the trap. I know you're behind everything. The photos, the apartment, the rumors at work. Prove it. I sipped my coffee and watched him pace like a caged animal. Better yet, explain to me why I should care about your problems when you clearly didn't care about mine. This has gone far enough, Jared. End it, or I'll end it for you. I set down my mug and looked at him, really looked at him. Brent was soft, a man who'd never worked with his hands, never fought for anything that mattered. He was used to getting what he wanted through charm and manipulation, not confrontation. You want to end something? Fine, let's take a drive. I grabbed my keys and walked out to my truck. After a moment's hesitation, Brent followed in his BMW. I led him out of town, onto the winding coastal roads that hugged the cliffs above the ocean. The roads I'd driven since I was 16, that I knew like the lines on my own hands. In my rearview mirror, I watched Brent struggle to keep up. His city boy driving skills weren't meant for these curves, these sudden drops and blind corners. I accelerated, taking each turn with practiced precision, forcing him to choose between losing me or pushing his limits. After 20 minutes of this tense back and forth, I guided him to the turnoff at Gull Point, a scenic overlook that was beautiful during the day and quiet at night. I parked and got out, waiting for him to realize he'd been steered into a secluded spot. Brent stumbled out of his car, shaking. You're crazy! You could have gotten us both hurt! But I didn't. See, the difference between us is that I know what I'm doing. You're just along for the ride. I walked over to his BMW and examined the paint job. Nice car. Shame about the finish, though. I pulled out my keys and carved a single word into the driver's side door. Homewrecker. Stop! Brent lunged at me, but I sidestepped easily. When he tried to grab me, I caught his wrist and twisted until he dropped to his knees. That's for my marriage, I said, releasing him. Next time, it'll be your career. And there will be a next time if you don't stay away from me and away from Nessa. You can't. I can do whatever I want, Brent. I'm not the one with something to lose anymore. Headlights swept across us as another car pulled into the overlook. Nessa's voice cut through the night air like a blade. "Brent, what are you doing here?" She ran toward us, then stopped when she saw the damage to his car. "Oh my God, what happened?" "Your ex-husband happened," Brent said, struggling to his feet. "Jared, this has to stop. We get it, okay? You're angry, but this is too much." I laughed, and the sound echoed off the cliffs. "Too much?" "Nessa, you haven't seen anything yet, but since you're both here, let me share some interesting news I discovered today." I pulled out my phone and showed them a photo of Brent having lunch with Marcy, taken that afternoon. They were holding hands across the table, and Marcy was wearing the necklace Nessa thought Brent had bought for her. Turns out, Brent here has been hedging his bets. Marcy's been feeding him information about you for weeks, Nessa. And in return, well, I gestured at the photo. Nessa stared at the image, then at Brent. "Is this true?" "It's not what it looks like." "It's exactly what it looks like," I interrupted. "Marcy's been playing both sides, and Brent's been playing both of you. Trust really is in short supply around here." The look on Nessa's face was worth everything I'd been through. Betrayal, humiliation, and the dawning realization that she'd traded a loyal husband for a man who couldn't even cheat honestly. The seaside motel wasn't much to look at, a relic from the 1960s that survived on desperate travelers and people who needed privacy for questionable activities. It was perfect for what I had planned. I sent separate texts to Nessa and Brent. "Have the last of your things. Room 12, Seaside Motel, 8 p.m. Come alone if you want to end this quietly." They both showed up, of course. Desperation makes people predictable. I was waiting in the room when they arrived together. Apparently, they'd decided to present a united front. The room was exactly what you'd expect. Faded carpet, mismatched furniture, and the smell of industrial disinfectant fighting a losing battle against decades of human misery. "Where are our things?" Nessa demanded. "Right here," I said, gesturing to the boxes stacked in the corner. "All of it. Photos, letters, gifts, memories, everything you left behind." But that wasn't all that was in those boxes. Mixed in with their belongings were printouts of every text message, every email, every piece of evidence I'd gathered over the past week. Their entire affair, laid out in chronological order like a police investigation. "You're sick," Brent said, but his voice shook. "I'm thorough. There's a difference." I sat down in the room's single chair, making myself comfortable. "See, I've been thinking about what you said, Nessa, about not loving me anymore. And I realized you're right. You don't love anyone. Not me, not Brent, not even yourself. You just take what you want and move on when it gets boring." "That's not true, isn't it? How long before you get tired of Brent? How long before he gets tired of sharing you with Marcy? How long before this whole house of cards comes tumbling down?" I stood up and walked to the window, pulling back the curtain. Funny thing about small towns, everyone talks. And right now, everyone's talking about you two. "Brent, your boss called me today, wanted to verify some rumors about your professional conduct. I told him I couldn't comment on ongoing personal matters." Brent went pale. "You didn't?" "I didn't have to. Your reputation is destroying itself. Amazing how that works." Nessa was crying again, but these weren't the manipulative tears she'd used on me for years. These were real, desperate, the tears of someone who finally understood the depth of their mistake. "What do you want from us?" she whispered. "Nothing. That's the beauty of it. I don't want anything from either of you. You've already given me everything I needed." I pulled out my phone and showed them the screen. Pete was live streaming from the parking lot, where a small crowd had gathered after word spread about our meeting. Marcy was there, along with Fiona and half the people from the spring mixer. "Smile," I said. "You're famous." The final humiliation came when they tried to leave. Brent's car wouldn't start. I'd disconnected the battery while they were inside. Nessa's purse was locked in my truck, along with her phone and car keys. They were stranded at the seaside motel while the whole town watched and recorded. I walked out to the parking lot, where Pete was holding court like a carnival barker. "Ladies and gentlemen, the show's over. Our featured performers are taking a well-deserved break from their touring act." Behind me, I could hear Nessa pleading with the crowd, trying to explain, trying to salvage something from the wreckage of her reputation. Brent was on his phone, probably calling a cab or his insurance company or a lawyer, anyone who might help him escape the consequences of his choices. I climbed into my truck and rolled down the windows. The night air was cool and clean, carrying the salt smell of the ocean and the sweet scent of justice served cold. As I drove away, I could see them in my rearview mirror, two people who'd thought they were smarter than everyone else, standing in the parking lot of a cheap motel while the town they'd tried to fool watched their final act. The game was over. I'd won. And unlike Nessa's promises or Brent's charm, that victory was something real, something that would last.